It's when you hear the real stories and the real people that things start to take a slightly different perspective, and you'll be aware of Antoine Liris, that young man who lost his wife and has said he wouldn't give Islamic State even the opportunity to have his anger in that way. A sort of defiant statement, but one which is very sort of protective of his child as well, and hopefully a positive way of looking at all of this. But how do you deal with grief under those circumstances? It's Children's Grief Awareness Week, actually. Let's talk to widower and blogger Ben Brooks-Dutton, who lost his wife nearly 3 years ago, leaving him with a young son. Good morning.
Morning.
It's very difficult to understand how you begin to deal with something like grief, like being widowed, especially within these sort of horrific circumstances. Your heart must bleed when you look at some of these stories.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a detachment there, really, because you just feel that, you know, with such high numbers of people trying to get your head around that grief and trying to even feel the empathy for it, we almost shut down, really. We almost want it to not have felt that way, to have not happened, because it's so hard to understand how much pain everyone's going through and the ripples that's having on so many people.
I mean, you're in a situation now where it's nearly 3 years.
It's just gone 3 years.
It's just gone 3 years.
Yeah.
Some people may be watching and think, well, that's quite a long time. I would think that's actually not a very long time for you in terms of what you're having to deal with, and raising your son as well, and what he has to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, it's felt like a very long time in some ways, and you know, just days in others. But he just turned 2, my son Jackson, when it happened, and he's just turned 5 now. And so, you know, the amount that not normal, but the amount that a child that hasn't been bereaved changes over that period of time, even in their awareness of what's going on around them, how they talk, how they behave, it's incredible anyway. But to go through that as a grieving child and as a grieving parent as well together is so difficult without support.
But particularly traumatic though, because the accident, the car that hit your wife happened in front of you, and both you and your son witnessed that. I mean, how did you begin to explain to him what had happened?
Well, for the first few weeks I didn't really. I just, because there were so many adults around, so many different people, that he wasn't really too aware of his loss at that stage. And while I had that grace of time, it gave me the opportunity to find people that knew more about the situation than me. So child bereavement services like Grief Encounter really helped me just really understand how I could start to explain things to my child, and how it wouldn't just be a one conversation thing. It would take years for that to happen.
But you said a moment ago about you and your son going through this together. I wonder if you have to put some of your emotions on hold to an extent for his benefit.
Yeah, to a certain degree you do, because I think that the one thing I learned very quickly was that I needed to speak to him about what had happened in the most calm environment possible. So not when I was, you know, heavily grieving, not when I was in tears, or not when he was angry, to wait for a calm time like bedtime to talk to him about these things, where he knew that he was loved, he knew that I was close by, and so, you know, to give him that comfort and reassurance.
It is Child Grief Awareness Week. We could almost do with an Adult Grief Awareness Week as well, tied in, couldn't we, in all of this? I wonder how important it is just to be able to talk about it. And I mean, in your experience, how many people have avoided you or not wanted to look you in the eye just because they don't know what to say, don't know how to handle you?
I mean, I hear stories about that all the time. I've been quite difficult to avoid because I started a blog to share and really open up about how I felt and what my son was going through as well. It was very public. But I hear that all the time. I think people want to think that kids are very resilient, and that they're, you know, to sort of brush their grief under an imaginary carpet, because they don't want them to be in pain. But we have to understand really that children do grieve, and understand that they grieve differently to us as well, and that it can take a lot of time for that to show.
How important is it that the memory of his mum stays alive, that you talk about her, that she's part of life? I don't know if there are pictures around the house.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Someone asked me the other day whether or not my son asks about his mum, and I was, you know, quite surprised by my answer, because I said no, he doesn't ask about her at all. He talks about her. It's different, because I've never stopped him. We've never stopped the conversation. We celebrate her birthday, or let's say we mark her birthday every year. We don't focus on the anniversaries of the day we lost her. We talk about her all the time. There's pictures up, and you know the conversation's very much still there. She's still there with us in many ways, as far as he's concerned.
And would you say he's a happy boy? I mean, it's. I don't know whether it's something that you ever recover from, even as an adult. He'll have sort of those memories, but is he a happy boy day to day?
Yeah, for the most part, he is now. I mean, but he was very, very angry when it happened, and that's something I needed to address. Grief Encounter again helped me with that because they were able to recognise that his anger and talk to him about it, and through age-appropriate therapeutic services, really start to address that anger that was there, so that we could get him to being a much happier boy that he is today.
Give us your blog site, because there's going to be people watching thinking I could do with reading that.
Yeah, it's called lifeasawidower.com.
Right, I will check that out if you need to. Ben, really good to talk to you. Appreciate it.
You too.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Do stay with us here on Sunrise. Lots more sort of come.